The 28 blank layer franchise has a pretty steady consistency so far of pretty great movies across the board. Just last year, its long anticipated sequel, 28 years later, hit cinemas and left a strong impression on audiences, myself included. Now we already have the follow-up, as it looks like these movies have been filmed back to back as a 3-part, really long film, which is great to see. 20 years later, The Bone Temple is a horror movie directed by Nia DaCosta. If you're anyway film-pilled, that name might vaguely ring familiar, for better or worse, as she was the director of The Marvels, a truly terrible dumpster fire which feels more like a fever dream than an actual movie, and not in a good way. This was around the time after Endgame when the MCU was really at their lowest, and in saying that, have they really gotten any better since? On the better side of things, she did also direct that Candyman remake that came out a couple of years ago, which Jordan Peele produced. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard from some people it's alright. With this in mind, I was a little skeptical going into this thing, but still knew I would be in some safe hands when the same cast reprised their roles. Which brings me to my first point as usual on this channel, which is performances. I'm going to start with Ralph Fiennes. Fiennes is known for roles in movies like In Bruges and The Grand Budapest Hotel. Fiennes reprises his role as Dr. Kelson, and here I thought any additions that were made to his character were great. There's a lot more life to the guy here through subtleties in Fiennes' performance. I feel like we learn a lot more about his character, and especially his personality. His caring nature to others around him is elevated even more here when we see scenes of him trying to understand the alpha zombie for the first part. The chemistry he and Chi Lewis-Parry had on screen together was nothing short of endearing to watch, which saying out loud seems weird to say for a zombie film, but this ended up being the case here. As for Chi Lewis-Parry, I thought he did a good job in his role as the alpha zombie, not just for the moments of his brutish nature, which in his own right he pulls off very well, as he brings an animalistic-like way of being to his character. To explain more about his performance, I'd have to delve into light spoilers, so with that in mind, you have been warned. Go see the movie, then come back here when you're done. There's a point in this movie where Kelson is drugging the alpha zombie who gives him the name of Samson, and we progressively see more humanity be brought back to him, and I think the way Parry conveyed this through his eyes and seeing his mannerisms change throughout the runtime was really interesting to see. Jack O'Connell is in the movie too, much more than he was in the previous installment. He's known for roles in movies like Sinners and Eden Lake. O'Connell plays the role of Jimmy Crystal, and I thought he somehow managed to be such a delight, while also being completely demented at the same time. Crystal is a completely psychotic character, and yet there are so many line readings pulled off by O'Connell that just got such a laugh out of me. Some came from nervous laughter, as through the writing, they have concocted such an unpredictable character here. At the same time, O'Connell brings the character down to a human level in one particular scene, which I really appreciated. We see another side of Jimmy, and it's hard for the viewer to decide with the way he's talking. Is it genuine or just an act? He was surely the highlight here. He stole any of the scenes he was in whenever he was on screen. Alfie Williams reprises his role as Spike from the last movie. He does good for the scenes that he has, even though the story is much less focused on his character. There is this underlying trauma from everything that's going on around him, which Williams is able to portray very well through his eyes and mannerisms, like how he carries himself around the other Jimmys. It's a much more subdued performance here, which is still good to see, and I'm sure he'll have more time to shine in the third and last installment. I found the direction this installment of the trilogy really interesting. In a way, it almost reads like filler, but really good filler. It's two stories converging into one. The first is about Kelson attempting to learn more about the virus, specifically how it affects the alpha zombie, and the other story picking up exactly where the first movie left off, seeing Spike's journey with the Jimmys. Both were very strong. I didn't particularly enjoy one person's plot over the other, as there was a good balance here in making it extremely entertaining from start to finish. There's so much to chew on in terms of its themes and other elements. There's a very heavy leaning into religious imagery, especially those who are well immersed in this sort of thing will surely get a kick out of it, specifically in some moments in the third act of the movie. There's a lot of sequences I really enjoyed out of this. A good portion of the first act really spoke to me. I thought it was a really beautiful story telling. With the way they handled stuff with Kelson then later on in the movie, like I said, I think the conversation he has with Jimmy Crystal is really well done too. It was surprising to see such a sadistic character humanized in a way while still keeping you on your toes about what would come next. This is very well paced for the direction it took too, but I think there's just so many wild moments here that easily keep you thoroughly engaged from start to finish. Moving on now, I want to talk about cinematography, which was done by Sean Bobbitt, who's done cinematography for movies like Judas and the Black Messiah and 12 Years a Slave. This film, while shot really well, feels less overwhelming than the first part. There was definitely an overuse of style that honestly, for me, worked pretty well in 28 years. There's a lot more restraint here, which makes sense as the film is filled with more quieter moments, but there was still a good use of some creative camera techniques, which I really enjoyed to see here. Particularly, there were shots that were meant to evoke Samson's POV, which was conveyed through the use of a snorri cam, something that for me personally can be very hit or miss, but I thought it worked well for what they were trying to achieve. This film is very vibrant when it comes to their colors, which I really appreciated. There's a great abundance of reds and greens and especially orange in this film, which I felt was such a treat on the eyes. If you're new to the channel, something I usually talk about whenever I review horror movies on here is if it's scary or not. I was surprised to see that in this movie they opted to throw in a couple more cheap jump scares from time to time, which are all composed in the same predictable manner where it doesn't end up scaring you. I think this benefits greatly more so on implied creepiness sometimes. Jack O'Connell especially does a great job at making you feel uncomfortable, which obviously doesn't help from the fact that the guy is dressed like Jimmy Savile, a point the filmmakers purposely put in to make more so the British audiences watching feel more fear, which is a good note. It further cements the idea that this franchise always pulls off really well, that while yes, this is a zombie movie, yes, this takes place during the apocalypse, but no matter what, there's always a handful of humans out there that will make it possible to fuck up your day even worse than any infected could ever try to pull off. So with all that being said, I don't think the movie is exceptionally scary, but there is a lot of well done creepiness. It's also too comedic most of the time to come off as being really scary. The music in this movie was composed by Hildur Guðnadóttir. There is a very high chance I have butchered her name, but she has done music for movies like Joker and Tar. The music in this was super interesting. The original score is so broken and cascades throughout the runtime. The way the violins and piano sound are so uncomfortable and to an extent pretty grating, but managed to fit a lot of the tense scenes in which they're placed in. The licensed music they got for this film was incredible. I love this soundtrack. We have music from bands like Duran Duran pretty frequently here. Radiohead gets put in at one point, and there's a big sequence with an Iron Maiden song that I'll be thinking about for the rest of the year at least. It was that good. All these choices suited the tone of this movie really well. So obviously I really like this movie. I think it's such a fitting continuation from the first part in what I do hope ends up being a trilogy. I think it's great that we're seeing an influx of horror movies that want to be more than just schlock, but also don't want to be too high in terms of fine art so that they can let themselves not be taken too seriously. There's only so much elevated horror I can watch before I get bored of it, honestly. The thing is bold for so many choices. On top of that, I think it's also much more violent than 28 Years, which sounds like an achievement in its own right. And the only reason it may not seem as such is because they know when and where to use the gore sparingly, which was something I was able to appreciate here. I feel like the filmmakers behind this are on such a great run so far, having 2 for 2 really great entries back to back in a franchise that before was kind of left dormant for a while, but it's clear they must have been waiting this long so that they could bring us something truly special. I'm giving 28 Years Later The Bone Temple 4.5 stars. This is really well acted, featuring, like I said, exceptional performances from the likes of Ralph Fiennes and of course Jack O'Connell. Despite its grimy and uncomfortable atmosphere, the screenplay, written again by Alex Garland, managed to shed some light, bringing forth some beauty in all the madness, while at the same time featuring sequences that present the viewer with a completely psychotic, demented nightmare that doesn't let you go from start to finish. All this is achieved brilliantly through its cinematography, its sharp editing, and skin-crawling sound design, all of which are well done. The film is currently running in theaters, and I can safely say without a doubt that I can't recommend seeing this on the big screen enough, as it makes the experience for this all that much better. So go check this out at your local cinema as soon as possible, as this is a film that absolutely cannot be missed.